So where is Bitcoin going? Hi there, crypto fans. Hi there, remote viewing fans. Dick Allgire here, a late Friday afternoon at beautiful Ethereum Place. The Bitcoin chart has reset. It got through 97. The resistance was 93 to 95. So we've broken through the resistance. It's going to go sideways a little bit. The next resistance will be about 100,000. But we fully expect, here's the important part, we expect Bitcoin to hit $140,000 to $152,000 this year, maybe even this summer. So mark that down. Why would you not? Okay, not financial advice. I have been proselytizing for cryptos and Bitcoin for almost 8 years now. Back when Bitcoin was $5,000, I was saying we're in the transition to a new financial system. Get some Bitcoin, get some cryptos. It was $10,000. I was saying that we're in the transition to a new, get them. Then it was 30,000. Then it was 60,000. Now it's 97,000. It's going to 140 to 152. Choice is yours. Okay. Last week I teased out a segment on tariffs and trade, the reality behind tariffs and trade and what Trump is doing. And I put here on YouTube just a teaser to that. I think for this weekend we should play the full thing unedited. What do you think? Okay, let's do it. Here's that full segment, me at the whiteboard explaining trades and tariff. You can chew on this over the weekend, and please comment below on what you think about what I say in this segment. I'll read your comments and we'll have a little discussion about them. So enjoy the segment. Here it is. The truth about trade and tariffs and why what they're really trading is human life and the value of your soul. Hi there, Future Forecasting Group subscribers. Dick Allgire here. This is an intense little talk I'm about to give. And I've got a storyboard with some pictograms to help me illustrate it and walk it through it sequentially. So here we go. We begin with trade, and trade in the old days was literally trading goods between people. So we have someone here who caught a fish, and somebody who lives in a different village grew some bananas, and some other guys up the road caught a pig or some other game. And so they're literally trading. There was no money used. This was, I'll give you a fish for 4 bananas, or I'll give you, a piece of this pig for 1 fish and a couple of bananas. So literally it was trade. It then, as people started exploring the globe, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and eventually the English Empire, they were using great sailing ships, and they would trade goods on a much larger scale. So they would take textiles and go pick up spices and bring the spices back. So they were trading good for goods, but just on a much larger level. At some point, the Templars got involved as they went out on the Crusades, and then there were Jesuits involved. And as they were conducting trade, the sailing ships were often doing it with silver. Silver was the reserve currency of the world. It changed over to gold, and the Templars and the Jesuits were doing it by way of bank accounts where they were doing chits or promissory notes. So it does go back to Jesuits and Templars, and they're still involved today. So silver and gold. What eventually was needed to settle these debts, they didn't want to ship gold and silver on boats because the boats could get shipwrecked, pirates could steal it, and it's just cumbersome and too much trouble to load up a bunch of silver and gold. So eventually central banks got involved. So central banks were the settlement tool without having to move gold around. So each country, different countries, different administrative areas had central banks where this was at the industrial age, so as a ship would sail, they would get an order and they would verify that order, and the central bank would release it and would be it would be issued at central banks. So central banks aren't just about making fake money and charging you interest to use it. They're also used as an international settlement tool, selling, storing gold and keeping track of moving that gold around between parties without actually having to move it. We come to the USA, which really is the big dog in global trade. It's the biggest. We were the industrial powerhouse. We were the manufacturing giant, and then became the consumer giant by design, by planning, by official dictates from administrators above the national level. So this happened. What happened with all the manufacturing and money leaving the United States was planned out in the early 1970s. In 1972, there was a conference in Lima, Peru. Then in 1975, there was the Lima Declaration, and you can Google and look up and read it yourself, the Lima Declaration of 1975, and they spelled out exactly what they needed to do was to take the industry and wealth of the first world, primarily US and Europe, and they needed to spread that out and take the manufacturing over to Asia, down to Mexico, South America. And that was well planned out, well thought out, and well implemented. So when you see in the 1990s, late 1990s, and the 2000s, all the manufacturing in China, that was planned decades earlier with the Lima Declaration. So what does all this, and now we're seeing the US is bringing in illegal immigrants. How is that part of trade? Well, the ultimate resource, the ultimate renewable resource on planet Earth is human life. So human life has a value, and that value is tracked by birth certificates. No matter what country you're in, you're given a birth certificate. It's a certificate of ownership that is traded at the Bank for International Settlements, which is above, it's the bank of the central bankers. So they have a superseding bank above the central banks, the Bank for International Settlements, where birth certificates are literally traded. When a birth certificate expires, when a person goes on to the next life and leaves this body and leaves this earth, the jurisdiction that has control and jurisdiction over a birth certificate gets a payout for that. So as you bring millions and tens of millions of illegal immigrants under the jurisdiction of the United States of America, there's a transfer account, and the value of their certificates is traded to that jurisdiction. Why do we have so many Chinese students in the United States? Because the US is in debt to China. China holds a vast amount of the US debt. A birth certificate of a Chinese peasant, you know, somebody working in a Chinese factory recently, or just farming rice in China, is the monetary value is not that great. If you educate a person, if you bring them from China to the United States and you give them a PhD or an engineering degree, the value of their birth certificate can go from like 8 to 10 million to 20 to 30 million. So the US is in effect paying off part of its debt to China by importing Chinese students and increasing the value of their birth certificates. Then they can either stay here and spy on us, or they can go home and make more money. But they're worth a lot more money, and there is value in that. Okay, what does this have to do with Donald Trump? Donald Trump is in office, and his goal is to balance the ledgers going into the new financial system. Trump doesn't want to trade life for debt, because all debts are paid, and if they need to be paid with human life, they will be paid with human life. An example of this would be Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At the end of World War II, Japan was defeated. They had lost the war. There was no way they could continue on. The U.S. could have just surrounded them, starved them out. There was no reason to fight anymore. You can read that history. That's the truth. Japan had not paid its full debt at that point in human life. So they took an atomic bomb and they dropped it on Hiroshima, and that vaporized and killed about 140,000 human bodies. And that wiped debt off the ledger. They looked at, the Red Cross looked at how many had died. Wasn't quite enough. Need a few more. So a few days later, they dropped another bomb on Nagasaki. Another 80 to 140,000 souls transitioned. And with that, in a spectacular ritual ceremony of fire, the debt was paid. Japan still had debt to pay financially, which to this day they've been paying to the United States. At the end of the World War II, Germany had a debt to pay. This is a story that is well hidden, but you can look it up and read about it. General Eisenhower, when Germany was conquered, unconditional surrender, there was no more fighting to be done, no more bodies to kill. Eisenhower rounded up many, many thousands, hundreds of thousands of German soldiers, and they erected barricades, and they left them out in fields with no water, no food. If someone took mercy on them, tried to throw them water, give them food, they were arrested by the MPs. And that life was taken as payment for the debt. And Germany has been paying financial debt for many, many years. So it brings us back to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is trying to balance the books to reduce the debt of the United States of America. So I'm not going to get political here, love him or hate him. That's his job. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to literally save lives as we transition into this new financial system that is going to be distributed ledger cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is the restructuring of the commerce of the planet Earth. We are living in such an amazing time. We're going into a new age where this old system of trade and tariffs and debts and how they were settled with gold, with, you know, the old system, it's going to be wiped out, and we're going to a new distributed ledger cryptocurrency system with Bitcoin as the store of value. So I'm sure you'll have some questions about that, and we'll bring our special friend on. You can ask some questions of him, and we'll have more on this. But that is the basic story. It's not sometimes pleasant to hear, but that's the reality of the matter. Thank you for listening.